let's shift over to the Jets really quickly. We talked about Zach Wilson, locked to go number 2, but let's kind of talk about the other pick because as I talked about in the open, it's not really discussed about. This is a big 23rd overall pick for the Jets. This isn't a team who's a quarterback away. This team has a ton of holes. So I'll start with you at 23. Who are some of kind of the guys you're looking at to get this team in the right direction?
Okay, so when you're building an NFL team, specifically a defense, there's 2 things that really stand out to me that I feel that are so imperative that you should have. A field general linebacker, so essentially a play caller back there, and a really strong secondary. Because in the NFL, this is a pass-heavy league. Everyone's throwing deep. Everyone's throwing passes just in general. So with that 23rd pick, Ryan, your Jets, for me, should take Greg Newsome, the cornerback from Northeastern. Now, I know that last year, your secondary was not particularly good, to put it nicely. Now, Marcus May had that one miracle play versus the Rams, and he had that his interception that he caught with his behind. So other than that, there really was nothing to cheer about for the most part. And according to Pro Football Focus last year, the Jets were the 5th worst secondary in 2020. So clearly in need, like you said, a lot of reinforcements. However, they've addressed some of that. They signed LaMarcus Joyner on a 1-year contract, which was a good signing. They brought in Justin Hardy. That was another really good signing. And I think if you want to kind of stagger that, Greg Newsome, he's a young cornerback, and we know that young cornerbacks in the NFL, they take a little time to really adjust because they're not guarding, say, you or I, or I'm 5'10", you're maybe a little taller than me, but we're obviously not crazy athletes where we can run really fast, jump really high, hands the size of baseball mitts. You know, he's kind of guarding people like us. When you go to the NFL, these are grown men, and these are incredibly physically gifted grown men. So I feel like boosting that cornerback position would be really good for the Jets. It definitely, I could say for now, band-aids that hole a bit in the secondary, definitely kind of stabilizes them in that back. And like I said, with Joyner and Hardy, you have 2 legitimate good secondary players there to start teaching, to add to Marcus May. CJ Mosley's coming back. I think that going for secondary and Greg Newsome would be a good fit for Robert Saleh's defense. I think it would be a very good, not a total mess up, a safe pick for the Jets.
Okay, so a few things there. You talk about the secondary. It's absolutely a need. I think you said it was the 5th worst. Thomas, I'll tell you, the only reason it was 5th worst is because they went down so many points. Teams just ran out the clock.
Yeah.
There was no guys in the secondary last year. So they definitely need to address that later in the draft. But I don't think that's what they're going to do round 1. And this is based off Joe Douglas' track record. He said from day one, the offensive line's always been his number 1 priority. You've seen it at his previous stops. Baltimore, he built up that Super Bowl line. And Philadelphia, he built up that Super Bowl O-line. So that's always been a priority for him. We saw it last year. He took Mekhi Becton in the 1st round, and they didn't really go out in free agency and spend. They missed out on Joe Thuney. They missed out on Lindsley, the center. So they're going to need to address that in the draft, and that's what I think they'll do. So I don't know who's going to be there. One guy I would take if he was there is Tevin Jenkins, the lineman from OK State. He can play guard or tackle, which will be useful because with George Fant, he's not really a long-term guy, so you can shift that and see where he goes. Tevin Jenkins is a violent blocker. He's been compared to Quentin Nelson. I think that's like his best case comp. And so I don't know if he'll be there at 23. There's also been reports that he's one of Joe Douglas's top guys, but that's a guy I'd look at. Another kind of other position you didn't mention is you need pass rushers in this league. Your cornerbacks don't mean anything if you're not getting after the passer, because then the quarterback's going to just sit in the pocket and hit guys. So I would look at Gregory Rousseau at 23. I don't know if he really fits there. He's been all over the place. He was supposed to be a top 10 pick going into the year. Things happened, COVID. He's fallen out of favor there. But I would still look at the O-line. Another guy, Elijah Vera Tucker, guard out of USC. He's probably been the best pass blocking lineman, and he's really good in that zone blocking scheme that Mikey LaFleur is going to install. So if I'm looking at the Jets and Joe Douglas, I kind of see this draft going QB, obviously, at number 2. Like, no question about that. And then I would personally go O-line at 23. I think there's enough guys between the 2 I mentioned, a few other Bama guys, Wyatt Davis from Ohio State, that you could look at 23. And then that early 2nd, I look at wide receiver. I think that's definitely a position that you can grab day 2. Denzel Mims is unproven, and you need to shore up that wide receiver 2 with Jameson Crowder in the slot and Corey Davis outright. And then you talked about the cornerbacks. I'd absolutely go corner with that extra 2nd and 3rd I definitely do think that's a need, but I do see the Jets kind of going O-line early, Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, O-line is that's probably the most important position in football because pretty much your entire offense would be predicated, especially running backs, on the offensive line. And you mentioned Elijah Vera Tucker, who I think could be a good pass blocker, especially if the Jets want to run that pass heavy offense. And you said before, you have Crowder, Davis, Denzel Mims, who could be good. I think he has the chance to be a pretty physical receiver, sort of like a better Tim Patrick, if you will, if you want to go that far. I feel like there's definitely something there with him. And you also mentioned building up the offensive line again as well. I'll just kind of stick with that theme. I don't know how much more I can emphasize Mekhi Becton is going to be probably the best left tackle one day. He's a gigantic human being. He literally can stop anyone who wants to attempt to, I guess, pressure the quarterback. And George Fant, unfortunately, it just really isn't that good. So I feel like the Jets, they definitely need to go with some offensive lineman versatility here, like you said. Now, you obviously know the Jets better than I do because you're a fan. And that's the team that you have watched throughout the years. So I'm going to go with you on that offensive line scheme as well, because they do kind of need that. But the pass rushing linebacker as well, I think with the defensive like front seven positions have been sort of all over the place. Like you said, they're really hard to predict. I mean, Rosso, he could be good. We don't know. There's also Kwity Paye. I mean, I don't know if you're going to be high enough to get him. There's Azeez Ojulari, who may or may not be there. So there's a lot of different choices, I guess, for the Jets to go if they want to go that route. The question is, like, it's a scheme fit at this point. Because like I just said, they've been impossible to predict for this draft. So I see that sort of as a hit or miss, but offensive line and the secondary, they definitely need to bolster. There's a lot of help needed there. And like you said, this Jets team has a lot of holes they've got to plug. So hopefully Joe Douglas can plug those holes. And I mean, I guess emphasizing the offensive line is a really good place to start. And then addressing the secondary is a good place to start.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough how tough of a draft this is to evaluate. It's completely unprecedented.
Yeah.
Teams don't have access to medicals, like they just don't have access like they are used to having. So you don't know on that aspect. Obviously, guys sat out seasons. So you're looking back years at tape. You don't have as much to work with. So it's so hard. It's certainly, you don't love having 2 firsts in a draft like this where there's a ton of unknowns, but obviously you'll take it. And so I think that's why we've seen a lot of these teams who haven't been reluctant. They've been giving up the first rounders because it is so hard to predict. Seahawks GM today kind of made a joke in passing how it's going to be a great draft. They have a ton of picks. They only have 3 picks. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you build teams to the draft. So I don't know why he's laughing that much. But for sure, it's going to be really tough to evaluate. I think offensive line is the right play for the Jets. I really do. I don't want to see Zach Wilson get killed the way Sam Darnold did. It was really tough to see the last few years.